Okay, so on this episode of the Leader Smith podcast, I have State Representative Josiah Magnuson back with us again. We had him here for a previous episode. So Josiah, welcome. You had a question for me this time.
In a world of incompetent bosses, micromanagers, and petty tyrants, you are listening to The Leader Smith. Now, here is your host, Darren Gertis.
So Josiah, welcome. You had a question for me this time.
Yes, thank you, Darren. And I certainly appreciate your podcast and have been following along. And, I wanted to throw something at you here because we've got a situation in the legislature right now where we've got, establishment Republicans, we've got Democrats. The establishment Republicans and Democrats tend to work together. And then we sort of have another small group of conservatives that are trying to make a difference and change some things. And, there's always this question about, it's important to work with people, but you gotta stand for principle. And sometimes that means, setting yourself apart from the crowd. But, I'm working on basically building this coalition of conservatives and trying to get us as a group to stand together. Mm-hmm. And we're almost seeing a division, though, within the conservatives. And I don't want that to keep happening. What we're seeing is there's people that want to do the team playing and work together and share our strategy and so forth. And then there's some that are really just purists, and they just truly don't feel like there's any compromise that's allowable. Mm-hmm. And if that means they have to stand alone, then that's okay. So I wanted to throw that at you. Where do you find that situation can be resolved? And because of course unity is better, and we want to be a team, but we want to also make sure that what we accomplish as a team is the right thing.
Yeah, so South Carolina is a funny state because we're so top heavy and conservative, or in Republican land, that we have a lot of fake conservatives running around. In our particular state, we have a lot of people that are looking like conservatives that aren't really. So they really should have a D behind their label, and then it would be easier to figure out who's who. Right? Because they want to get elected. But I found that it's very hard sometimes to work with the purists, because the purists, and they're pure on different things. And if you're not pure on exactly their thing, then, well, you must be the devil. It's easier to work with people that are willing to compromise, but now you don't know if you can trust them because they compromise too much. I worked on a congressional campaign out in Tennessee in 1998 with a guy named Jim McGuire. And Jim then went on to work for a number of congressmen. And Jim was telling me, I went to visit him on the Hill, and he was telling me about, well, so who do you work for and what's he like? And he said, well, I used to work for one guy, and he was a stud, but he never got anything done. He was the purist, right? And then he said, I'm working for this other guy, and well, what's he like? He said, well, he's a whore, but he gets lots of things done. And that's, it's a funny, so you have this or that. And the idea is you want to get things done without being a whore, right? I mean, you want to get things compromised. And so I think the place that I would look for compromise or things like this, what are the things that I hold really dear that are essential? There's this quote from the Anglican Church in essentials, unity; in non-essentials, liberty; in all things, charity, right? So I think that's a really good way to start thinking about this. What are my non-essentials? I'm pro-life. I don't think a child should be killed just because somebody feels like it's their decision to, just like I don't think anybody else should be killed. And that's an essential. I can give in certain places that are non-essentials, that are way down the totem pole, in order to work with somebody, but I want to make sure that I'm holding on to basic core principles. Does that make sense? And so I want to think in terms of, I want to give only in those places where it's non-essential, but I want to be kind along the way, because you never know, that kindness can be returned very easily. It's a very hard thing for a Liberty Caucus kind of group in Washington or in South Carolina to get that traction, because they get marginalized by those who currently hold the power positions. And so because they hold those power positions, until you get enough of a majority for them to want to work with you, they're going to keep pushing and excluding, because they're trying to bring other members into that club who are going to do more of what they want to get done. So you're really disturbed. There's an imbalance in the force when people like you show up.
I'll take that as a compliment, Darren.
No, that's absolutely a compliment. That's exactly what's going on.
I'll tell you, and it can be frustrating because, I tend to be of the ilk. I think it was George Patton that said, leadership is the art of never compromising, you know,
So
and, but it's tough because you've got to be able, like you said, to find what are my non-essentials,
right.
and um, where can I actually give a little bit and maybe not achieve something that's my ultimate goal, but still make progress and move the ball down the field. And so I think from what you're saying, and I agree with this, is we need to know what are the things that are our essentials.
Mm-hmm. And there should be the shared essentials core to all of us on this side of the fence, right? Not just this one thing that somebody holds here, and if you're not this, and so now you're out of the club. On the other side of that fence, it's the moderates that are. I found I was stabbed in the back far more by the moderates. So I spent 3 years on my school board back in Virginia. And so that was an interesting time. There were 9 on the board, and we had a lot of 8-1 votes. So I was the one. And so I understand what that's like, because there are certain principles that hey, this is where I stand. I planted that flag. And if anybody wants to join me, come and join me. But if not, I'm still willing to stand there. And you have to have that principle, that conviction. But it's the moderates. There were folks that would tell me, that would agree with me all day long and then vote the other direction. I'm like, how how do you say, in a private conversation just before this vote, you were saying yes, I agree with you, I'm going with, but then they would go with that crowd, and it's just a tough place to be.
And sometimes that's another part of the frustration, is because I had this happen last week, in fact, or 2 weeks ago, when we were down there in Columbia, and I was putting up an amendment, and I had a liberal Democrat actually go ahead and say that what I was supporting was reasonable. But then she voted, obviously the other direction. But I think sometimes people have allegiance to their group or to the personalities that they trust, and our side doesn't necessarily know how to play on that kind of field. How do we improve in that area? How do we work more with people and realize where we can come to agreement in that way?
Yeah. So we don't feel it as keenly here in the United States because we have this Republicans or Democrats. But if you cross the pond, it's all coalition building, right? So in Parliament in Great Britain, it's this coalition, the conservatives and a bunch of people that have quasi-conservative like names all together, and you have the liberals and the Labor Party and the socialists and others with that kind of name that are in that coalition. And we need to think more in coalitions, because if you think in the coalitions, what is so, and this made me think back of why we actually connected it, goes back to the homeschool bill about 5-7 years ago, something like that, in South Carolina. And then out of that, oh, and hey, did you know that this guy Josiah Magnuson was going to be running for office? And because of connections that I made there, that's how I actually ran into you. And so for people who don't know, this bill was going to say, essentially, this was 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats saying homeschoolers are not regulated enough. I mean, they might be falling through the crack, as if in the public schools you're not falling through the cracks already. Like, mind your business. We're actually doing far better than where you are. So this was to regulate it, and all these conservatives came out of the woodwork. It was fascinating. Like, I mean, all the homeschool parents came out of the woodworks trying to and it was mostly conservatives, a few liberals, but we were all in the same camp about, hey, this shall not stand. You can't be regulated. And the idea was that you'd have to test the state standards, which sounds okay until you realize homeschoolers, they do it differently. They're all over the map. They might be in a higher grade in this and a lower in this one, and studying something completely different than what would be in the normal curriculum. But we all pulled together. We forced 3 of the co-sponsors of the bill off the bill. They took their names off the bill. The 4th one said, oh, I can't really take my name off the bill, but I don't want it to pass anymore. After 2 weeks of intense pressure, it was the most amazing thing that I've ever seen in the legislature. And so it just squashed it. But as soon as they won, what happened? They became factions warring with each other, and the purists over here didn't like the moderates over here, who everybody didn't like the liberals over here, and they just, it imploded. It's very hard to keep human beings together. Now, I don't know if I answered your question, but it sounds like that's what's going on because we're humans, and that's what humans do. Humans factionalize. This is like Madison Federalist 10. Humans turn into factions as soon as they can. And how to hold that together, you have to have one focus. You have to know what the flag is that you're all surrounding.
Well, I think that is helpful. And, we're going to have to do a better job of, I think, communicating with one another. And I think we're going to have to do a better job of knowing what the truly key issues are that we can all unite behind. Mm-hmm. And it's tough because in the House or in the Senate, a lot of times there's procedural votes and there's different, and one issue may be, more important than another issue to certain people, where some issues are, that's the be all end all. But if you vote even against them on a procedural vote, then, you've failed. But, I think what you said about trust is really part of the heart of this, because we've got to be able to trust one another in, at least within a group of conservatives. Yep. And we've got to really build that. And I think certainly we can't trust the other side. They're always going to stab us in the back, but we've got to find a way to come together and be a team, with our friends at the very least.
Yeah. And so that common vision is going to be core to holding your side together. And so what I mean by that, if you think in national politics, people that have done this well, think Reagan, right? What was Reagan? I mean, if you just had to summarize him in a sentence, we're going to roll back communism, right? What did Newt Gingrich do? He had the contract with America, and it articulated very clearly those few things that we're all subscribing to. We need something like that here. Okay. Or what's Trump, master marketer? What's his tagline? Whatever you think about Trump, what's his tagline? Make America great again. Okay. So at least we know where we're trying to get to, whether or not you subscribe to that way of getting there. But there are these big concepts that everybody can latch onto. And that's what we need. Otherwise, it becomes this devolution into multiple personalities and my faction or my wing or this. And it just implodes. I think it's more of a natural order from what I see both in politics and even in organization. Factions are more of a natural system than holding together. And that's kind of sad, but that's how sinful human beings behave.
Well, I think that is very helpful. And I think you're right that, as scripture says, without a vision, the people perish.
Absolutely.
We've got to project the ideas that we're pursuing. And ultimately, if we don't do a good job of that, then we have nobody to blame but ourselves.
Yep. And I'm sure you're the kind of guy that can help pull this together. You and a few others. And it only takes a small percentage of people. You don't need 50% to really move the needle. You only need a small percentage of dedicated folks that are going to actually make change happen. That's how it always happens. Once you get into the teens or into the 20s, you win. That's the way it works, because there are a lot of people that are going to come along for the ride because they don't want to lose. And so just be encouraged by that. And let me go to the quotation for contemplation for today, and then I'll give you the last word if you have any other thoughts. This comes from Ronald Reagan. Sometimes in our administration, the right hand doesn't know what the far right hand is doing.
That sounds apt for the moment today. I'll follow up with your last concept, and I'll give you a quote as well from Samuel Adams. And I love this idea. He says, "It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate and tireless minority keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men."
There you go.
So we can certainly rest on that, I think, and look forward to those brush fires continuing to be set.
And you're the guy that's going to be the pyromaniac, I'm sure.
Hopefully a team player pyromaniac.
Yeah. Pyromaniac for good. All right. Hey, thanks for coming on, and I really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Professor. You too.
Bye-bye. you're more in the purist side, but you're not the mean purist type. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like your whole, you set this flag and said, hey, this is where I am. I got to this place in the school board where I started saying, they would say, we're going to do this nutty thing. And I would go, I'm just voting against that. So I'm telling you ahead of time. So this was like in a closed session. I'd say, when we get to that, can you just like take all these different things that were going to be used as, props? Like they would have these, they vote for these 7 different things in order to make a statement. And I would say, look, in the closed session, I'd say, I'm going to be voting against it. Can you just take it as one? So it's not, I mean, what you want is a show of unanimity, and you're not going to get it. So rather than have me vote against it each time, which is going to make you look bad, just take it as one. And so I'm working with them as much as I'm working against them, but they know that I planted that flag and that's where I am. So you can do that as well. And that is a helpful way to kind of get along and work without sacrificing your principle.
That's good. Find ways to not intentionally make them look bad, but still put forward, where I think the line exists.
That's correct. That's exactly right. I'm not gonna move from what I believe to be right, but I'm not gonna be a jerk about it. Right?
Yeah.
There's nothing good comes out of being a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
So okay. So anyway,
that should have been on the video too.
Oh yeah, I might work that in.